we got to get going here with the class. Anyway, we could have watched more, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the, now I found it. Now I know where it is. Anyway, so last time we learned about protagonist and antagonist. And we learned about arc, right? You know, the arc, that the plot kind of picks up pace and then it drops and then it, you know, different things. We learned about the anti-hero, right? We learned a lot of stuff last week. And we're going to keep on learning, because today I'm going to tell you another. The main character is Mrs. Frisbee. No, the main character is Mrs. Frisbee. Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, Mrs. Frisbee. I think the crow was calling her Brisby, but that was by mistake. Maybe because the crow is not too smart, but her real name is Frisbee. Yeah. Okay, so let's get to class 3, which is where we left it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the chapter summary. But before we do that, let's keep on talking a little bit about these literary devices or literary concepts. So we talked about the protagonist, right? We said protagonist. And I'm sorry for my handwriting. Protagonist. And then we said the antagonist. Antagonist. The good guy, the bad guy, right? Or at least the leading character. And then we also have a protagonist who could be an anti-hero, right? An anti-hero. So a protagonist who is an anti-hero. Oh, I'm sorry. A protagonist who is an anti-hero, he's not a good guy, but he is the main character. And then the antagonist, in that case, the antagonist is the hero, because the antagonist could be a detective or a cop or something like that, right? And then we said that they were these things, this one thing called the plot arc, where the action rises and it falls, and then maybe it rises again, and then it falls again. Some plots, they start somewhere, and then the good guy dies, in which case the plot goes boom all the way down. Sometimes the good guy goes down, but then he goes up again. You know, he has problems, but then he overcomes his problems and he rises, and then he finishes happily ever after. So remember that this is what's called the plot arc. The plot arc, right? Because it's kind of like an arc, kind of like this, right? Kind of like an arc. So now let's talk about archetypes, and I'm going to write it down. Let me write it in block letters. Whoa, sorry about that. Archetypes. And an archetype is kind of like a model. Archetypes. I guess it's kind of like a model or something that repeats. It repeats itself. What I mean by that is that you have one archetype is the mother archetype, right? And the mother archetype is that woman who is motherly all the time. And we see many characters that are the mother archetype. Then you have another archetype, which is the bad guy archetype, right? The bad guy archetype. That could be another archetype. Or the hero archetype. The hero archetype. And all hero archetypes, they all have the same qualities. They all try to save victims from something horrible to happen to them. They always fight the bad guys, always. They always fight the bad guys. The bad guys are always trying to rob, to steal, to kill. The mother archetype is the type of woman that is always mothering people. We see her as the type of woman who takes people in and mothers them and, you know, feeds them and clothes them and is always giving of herself for others. You have another archetype, which is called the sidekick. The sidekick. And the sidekick is that one person who, he's not the protagonist. He's not the main character, but he helps the main character perform his duties. And there's been many, many sidekick archetypes. For instance, Batman and Robin. You know, Robin had a sidekick. In some of the later movies, it's Batman by himself. But at the beginning, when Batman started, Batman had Robin. He had Robin. And Robin was the sidekick archetype because he helped Batman to be a hero. Now, there are many other archetypes, many other sidekick archetypes in literature. For instance, in the book, The Old Man and the Sea, right? Where Santiago, the old man, he goes out and he tries to catch this big, big fish. And he brings the big fish in, but the sharks eat the fish. So he's not able, he brings in the skeleton, but that's all he could bring in. Now, he had a sidekick. He had a boy, his name was Manolín. And Manolín always hung around with him. No matter whatever Santiago did, Manolín was there. And Manolín would help Santiago, would make him look bigger than what he was. And that's what the sidekicks usually do. So an archetype is a type of character that we see personified in many, many different roles. In many different roles. In Old Man and the Sea, Manolín is the sidekick. In Batman, Robin was the sidekick, right? Robin was the sidekick. So we see a sidekick in many cases. We also see the mother archetype. Now, Mrs. Frisbee, she is in a way the mother archetype. First of all, she plays a mother, right? She plays a mother. But even if she didn't play a mother, she's motherly. She's motherly, right? She's motherly. Now, the old man that had the broken leg, what was his name? You guys remember? The old guy with a broken leg. He's kind of the...
Mr. Aegis?
Mr. Aegis.
I forgot his name, Mr. Aegis.
Mr. Aegis.
Right, Mr. Aegis. Mr. Aegis is the scientist archetype, or the wise old man archetype. The wise old man. For instance, in Star Wars, if you've ever seen the movie Star Wars, remember Yoda? Yoda, the old guy that had the cane, that always said things that were very wise, very intelligent things. He is the wise archetype. He is the old guy who's wise. He was also a mentor. A mentor is someone who takes a younger person and teaches that younger person how to do things. So remember archetypes. There are many archetypes. Actually, we can go to a list of archetypes, and I'll show you. I'll show you here in Google, so that you can have an idea of what an archetype is. And these are important literary because we see them often in. Yes, my dear.
I think in Mr. Frisbee's story, the rats are a sidekick.
Which one?
For in Mr. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, I think the rats are a sidekick for Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah, they could be, but usually the sidekick is only one. And it could be that Mrs. Frisbee doesn't really have a sidekick. You don't have to have a sidekick.
I think the shrew is the sidekick.
Could be.
I think Jeremy is the sidekick, actually.
Maybe the sidekick is the crow. The crow could be the sidekick. Because a lot of times the sidekick is kind of goofy, kind of a goofy kind of a guy, right? Could be kind of a goofy guy. So let's look here. Archetypes in literature. Let's see if we see something here. We see the types. So it says archetype in literary criticism, a primordial image, character, or pattern of circumstances that recurs. It recurs all the time. So that's a little hard to understand, but just remember, it's a type that comes up all the time in literature. Examples and definition of archetype. Let's look at guys over here and see what they say. Okay, so an archetype is a literary device in which a character is created based on a set of qualities or traits that are specific and identifiable for readers, right? So these are common archetypes. These are characters that we see over and over and over again. The lover, character guided by emotion and passion. A hero, who is a protagonist. An outlaw, a criminal. Character that is rebellious or outside society, right? A magician, powerful character that understands and uses universal forces, like Yoda in Star Wars. Like Yoda in Star Wars, there are 12 types. You only said 3. Yeah, I only said 3 or 4. And there's actually more than 12. I think that when you start really.
Nicodemus is the last one.
Yeah. So anyway, so the magician, the explorer, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right here, there are 12. But I bet you can come up with more. So the explorer, that's another archetype. The sage, which is someone who is very wise. A creator, an innocent, a caregiver, a jester. A jester is kind of like a comic, right? A funny person. The crow could be the jester, right? The crow could be the jester. every man, you know, a regular guy, a ruler. But it's this list here is not mentioning the sidekick. It's not mentioning a lot of the others, right? So these are some of the archetypes. Caregivers, jesters, you know. Let's see if we see more in another one. Let me see what you guys are saying here. See, have you read Harry Potter's books? Yeah, Harry Potter. There's a lot of archetypes in Harry Potter. Let me see, archetype definition and examples. Here's another one. What is an archetype? An archetype is something that repeats itself. So example one, the most famous example of an archetype is the hero. That's the one that we always know. And the trickster, there's another one, a trickster. It's a guy that plays tricks on people. Then you have another archetype, the anti-hero. That's why I told you that there's a lot more than 12. The anti-hero, the guy who is the protagonist, but he's not a hero. He's not a good guy. You know, he really isn't a good guy. So there's a lot of archetypes. And as we read the book, it might be a good idea if you keep all of these concepts that we've been talking about, keep them in mind. For instance, who is the protagonist? Who is the antagonist? Have you decided who the protagonist? Well, we know the protagonist is Mrs. Frisbee. And I think we said last time that the farmer might be the antagonist, right? The antagonist could be the farmer. And then we said, well, what kind of a plot does this have? Is it a plot where everybody ends up happy at the end and they live happily ever after? Or is it one where there's a tragedy and everybody dies at the end, right? And that's the plot arc. Now we're adding something else, and we're adding the archetypes. So Mrs. Frisbee, she's the protagonist, but is she the mother archetype? Is she the hero archetype? Is she a hero? She could be a hero archetype. Right? Who is the outlaw? Is there an outlaw? Who is the jester? The jester is the funny one. I think the jester is the crow, because he does bad things. He does not bad things, but crazy things. And funny, he's funny. Dragon, the cat. How could we categorize Dragon, the cat? Probably the outlaw. He could be the outlaw. So keep all of these in mind as we're reading this. And not just when we read this, but also when you read other books. Try to identify protagonist, antagonist, the plot. Does it go up? Does it go down? How does it end? Try to identify the archetypes in the novel. The mother archetype, the hero archetype, the outlaw archetype, the jester archetype, the sidekick archetype, the survivor archetype. There are many archetypes. So you have to, you should do that. That makes the reading more fun. And you learn more about literature when you do that, right? So anyway, so let's go on. And let's talk a little bit about the book. Chapter summary. So now we're going to go through each chapter and we're going to summarize it.
那个 archetype 呢？
What's that?
那个故事正常有啥像主派的人
Chinese.
？A lot of books.
Why don't you shut your mic so that hello. Shut your mic. Yeah, he's unmuted. Okay, anyway, chapter summary. Chapter 1 to 3. In the beginning of the story, the reader meets Mrs. Frisbee, a mouse whose husband has died.
哦，真可爱。
finds out where she lives on the farm. Timothy, Mrs. Frisbee's son, is ill with pneumonia, and this causes her great concern. She's very concerned that he's going to die. Mrs. Frisbee goes to Mr. Aegis, a wise old mouse. So Mr. Aegis is kind of like the wise archetype.
He's the doctor for the mice.
He's the doctor for the mice. He's a mouse doctor. Yes, he's a mouse doctor. To get medicine for Timothy. When she's returning from seeing Mr. Aegis, she saves Jeremy, a crow, from Dragon the cat. Dragon, he's kind of like the outlaw. He's the bad guy in this whole thing. What did Mrs. Frisbee know Mr. Aegis by hearing about him because he's a doctor?
It's because he was a friend of her husband.
Aha, that's right. He was a friend of the husband. Yeah, you're totally correct. Chapter 4 to chapter 6. Mr. Fitzgibbon will be plowing his field, and the mice need to move to their summer home. However, Mrs. Frisbee is worried that Timothy will not survive the trip. She discovers that the farmer plans to start plowing in 5 days, earlier than she expected. And she doesn't know what to do. Jeremy tells Mrs. Frisbee that she should ask the wise old owl what to do, and he would fly her there to see him. So Jeremy takes Mrs. Frisbee to the wise old owl. But remember that owls, they eat mice. So she was taking a big chance by doing that. And that's why the one Mr. Aegis says, what? You got to see the owl? No, that's impossible. He didn't eat you. Whoever goes in there, they don't come out. So how she managed that, I don't know. I don't know how she managed that. Chapter 7 and chapter 8. At first, the owl is reluctant to help Mrs. Frisbee until he finds out that she is the widow of Jonathan Frisbee. The owl suggests she seek help from the rats that live under the rose bush. So he didn't eat her. He realized that she was the wife of Jonathan Frisbee. And I guess he kind of admired Jonathan Frisbee because Jonathan Frisbee was a really smart rat. He was one of the rats that became super intelligent.
That had got the injections with the rats.
That's right. The one that took the injection, he was one of the original ones that took the injections. Chapter 9 and 10. Terrified but brave, Mrs. Frisbee goes to the rose bush to ask the rats for help. She meets a large rat named Brutus. And Brutus, what is Brutus in the archetype? I don't know.
Brutus and Justin are the guards.
Yeah.
It's mainly Justin, but Brutus was a substitute because Justin was at a meeting.
Ah, all right. Who doesn't want to let her see Nicodemus, but eventually he does when Mr. Aegis tells him that she is the wife of Jonathan Frisbee. Hey, Brutus, do you know who she is? She's the wife of Jonathan. So let her go. Leave her alone, right? So that's kind of what happened. chapter 11 and chapter 13. Once inside, Mrs. Frisbee learns that the rats have electricity. Really? Oh my God. Lights.
They
Oh my,
have elevators.
yeah. And an elevator underground. She meets Nicodemus, the rat leader, and then is taken to the library to wait for him. She also starts learning about the plan of the rats of Nim. While in the library, she meets a girl rat named Isabella, who starts to tell her some things about life in the rat colony. Isabella also tells her about Jenner, who deserted the colony because he didn't agree with the plan. Mrs. Frisbee doesn't get to ask Isabella any more questions because Nicodemus comes in with Mr. Ages. They talk to Mrs. Frisbee about moving her house and about the dangers of the cat dragon. She agrees to put powder in Dragon's food. So I guess.
No, it was that first.
Yeah.
Originally, the job, I think it was Jonathan's, but Jonathan Frisbee died because he failed putting the powder and got eaten by dragon. And then it was Mr. Ages who was the one to put the powder. But Mr. Ages had a broken leg, so he can't dash. So Mr. Frisbee volunteered in dashing and dropping the powder.
Very interesting.
I'm done with the whole book, so I know a lot.
Yeah, I guess so. Very good. Very good. Okay, chapter 14 to 17. Mrs. Frisbee learns that her husband died putting powder in Dragon's food. Nicodemus also tells her about Nim. He explains how the rats were caught and taken to a laboratory and given injections to speed up the training process. He tells the story of how Justin, a young rat, tried to escape one day. Chapter 18 to chapter 20. Nicodemus continues telling his story to Mrs. Frisbee and includes how the rats learned to read, how reading signs helped the rats escape from Nim, and how they escaped with Jonathan and Mr. Ages. He explains how they found a place to live, the Boniface Estate. The Boniface Estate. Chapter 21 and chapter 20 to 23. Mrs. Frisbee returns to the children and tells them the rats will help. She goes back to the rats the next day and they show her the main hall and reveal their plan. They want to become self-sufficient and live without stealing food. Nicodemus continues his story about Boniface Estate and a toy truck full of useful stuff they found, which was the catalyst for the plan. He also explains how and why. Yeah, what is it? Why Jenner.
The truck was called Toy Tinker.
The what? I couldn't hear you. Say again. Okay, chapter 24.
The toy truck was called Toy Tinker.
Ah, I see. Got it. Got it. Very good. Very good. Mrs. Frisbee goes to put the powder in Dragon's food bowl. While she is in the house, Billy, the farmer's son, catches her using a colander and a net. You know, it's kind of like a thing that he can scoop her with. He decides to keep her as a pet. While she's being held captive, she overhears a conversation about the public health service coming to the farm to get the rats of Nim. They want to kill the rats. Justin comes and rescues Mrs. Frisbee. When they get to the moving site, a shrew is standing in the way of allowing the rats to move Mrs. Frisbee's house. After all the confusion is straightened out, the rats successfully move the mice's house. Chapter 27 to the epilogue. That's the ending. Mrs. Frisbee goes to a meeting with the rats to discuss the man that may be coming for them. They devise a plan to fool the man if they are from Nim, and decide the time has come to move. A doctor came to get the rats, but they outsmarted him and they escaped. Mrs. Frisbee watches the scene unfold. It is thought that Justin died when the doctor tried to capture the rats. In the epilogue, Mrs. Frisbee finally tells her children the truth about the rats of Nim. So now we know, the children, now they know. Okay, so now let's take a look at the characters and let's see, and this is why I told you about the archetypes, right? Because I knew that we were going to talk about the characters. Maybe we can identify some of these characters as to what kind of archetypes they are. Mrs. Frisbee. Mrs. Frisbee is portrayed as a more motherly type figure in the book. So she's kind of like the mother archetype, right? Wasn't mice and rats the same thing? No. A rat is a bigger mouse. It looks like a mouse. They're all rodents. You know, kind of like dogs are canines. Cats are felines. I think chapter 27 is the last chapter, yeah. Rats are rodents. So mice are rodents, rats are rodents, but rats are bigger than mice. Rats are bigger than mice. Mrs. Frisbee is portrayed as a more motherly type figure in the book, even as she is typical mom, dodging cats and getting milk for her kids. So she's definitely the mother archetype. She's also a mouse with a big heart, helping other animals in need, and ultimately being the hero of the book. Her acts of bravery cause her to gain recognition among the animals, the animal community, and she ultimately helps fight against the genetically engineered rats known as super what? As super rats.
Question.
Yeah.
Isn't she supposed to be a heroine, not a hero?
Heroine. Yeah. You can say that she's a heroine. Let me see what. So what is the second movie? So there is rats and men. I don't think that the second movie ever came out. The second book it did. There is a follow-up book, but I don't think they made a. I don't think they made a movie out of it. But I think that there is a second book, and it wasn't written by the author. It was written by his daughter. This is my understanding. But you know, we'll find out. We'll get to the bottom of that. Find out. So anyway, and we'll find out too what the follow-up book is, if there is a follow-up book. Is Mrs. Frisbee's main character in this? No, I've never read the second book, and we'll find out. I'm going to get that information for you, and I'll let you know.
There is a second movie.
Oh, there is a second movie. What's it called?
It's just called The Secret of Nymph.
No,
And I
this is
forgot,
what we were watching is The Secret of Nim.
like there is a second movie, but I forgot what it's called. I think so. It's called Timmy. I think so. It's just Timmy something. I forgot.
Let me look it up. Hold on. Let me look it up here in my let me look it in my telephone. Sequel to
It's called Timmy to the Rescue.
Secret of Nim. Timmy, yeah, Timmy to the Rescue. You're totally correct. That's what it's called. I wonder if there is a, let me look in YouTube. Let me see. Let's see. Timmy to the Rescue, full movie. There is. Wow. Oh, yeah, look at that. Oh, we got to watch that. After we do this, let's turn to that and see if we can watch it. There is a full movie. So let's see. I think the main character is Timmy. Yeah, this time. And this time, then the main character switches to Timmy. Yeah. We'll do it after we finish with this. Then the other guy is Jenner. Jenner is seen as the hypothetical second leader of the Rats of Nim. Some can refer to him as Nicodemus, alter ego. In other words, kind of like the mirror image of Nicodemus. He only lingers in the mind of Nicodemus, but lingers enough to make an impact on Nicodemus's decision. Jenner is the more cultural perspective of the book. He believes that the rat culture should stay the same and rats should learn how to thrive based on what is taught to them and what they learned. In the book, Jenner is seen in flashbacks, and we can see Nicodemus trying to learn from Jenner's mistakes. So that's kind of what's going on here. Jenner. Nicodemus is the tough, stubborn male character in the book, portrayed as having an eye patch and a long scar along the side of his face. He is the leader of the genetically engineered rats. He's the leader of the smart rats. He gives us an inside look into the society of rats and how their organization operates. Nicodemus is the smarts of the colony and is known for giving rhetoric speeches and being the voice of reason, the voice of reason. So those are, and then next week we're going to do the glossary. Glossary is the words that we can learn from, you know, like frenzy and stuff like that. So we'll do that next week. Now let's put a sign here that says, this is the fourth class. Let's look at that one video. Let's look at it a little bit and see how it is. I am let's see, YouTube, and we said it was What's that? We said it was Timmy to the rescue, right? So let's look for it. Timmy to the rescue. Yeah, something happened here. Timmy to the rescue. Full movie. Okay. Arcs and the Rats of Nim is another one. Yeah, maybe. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Let's watch this one.